week 13, I believe, episode 12 of the ABCs of CFB. As always, you have myself, Alec Pappas, and my two co-hosts, Chris Porritt and Bryant Kraft. Really excited to be speaking this week, gentlemen. It was quite an eventful last weekend, which we'll get into. Quite an eventful day. We're recording this on Thursday, the 1st of December, and a lot of news has come out today for Michigan. But yeah, I'm excited to be able to do this because we didn't unfortunately have the opportunity to do a podcast leading into the games last week. But still a lot happened. So Chris, how was your Thanksgiving and how was just your weekend?
Yeah, it was great. Both were great. It was, really nice to see family over Thanksgiving. I saw, some of my mom's side of the family, that are all pretty much all Michigan fans. So we're able to talk about the game a little bit. They were somewhat confident, but not like last year. I actually sensed a lot more confidence before the 2021 Michigan Ohio State game than I did this year. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was at Ohio State. That alone makes a big difference. But I didn't necessarily sense as much confidence this year as last year, but obviously similar result, maybe even more lopsided this year. I thought Ohio State got completely out coached. I thought that was the biggest difference. But yeah, no, other than that, great weekends. I watched the Michigan State game. Honestly, went about the way I expected it to, with MSU not having many options on defense. It was just kind of going to be a matter of, is Penn State gonna put or going to go 100 miles an hour from the very beginning, or was it going to be kind of a slow burn? But I figured MSU would probably win by lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And that's how it played out. So I'll pass it over to Bryant.
Yeah, BC, how was your week?
Yeah, no, it was a good one. I would say for me, it pains me to say that I'm semi happy that college football season is over. Just with everything that could go wrong went wrong. That was sort of the synopsis of Michigan State season, and then yeah, everything that could go right went right for Michigan. So it's like the worst of both worlds. So ready to put it behind me and have all that hopeless optimism for 2023 and get into college basketball season here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, why don't we transition right into just talking about the Michigan Ohio State game? I know Chris touched on it, but biggest game of the year for both Michigan and Ohio State. Chris, you were talking about a lot of your family being U of M fans, and they were not as confident headed into this game. I was kind of in that wheelhouse because we didn't have the pass rush that we had last year. Ohio State really had been looking great the entire year. And I will admit, even though we didn't want it to take place, it was something I was sort of monitoring, which was the weather. And then, of course, it was the best day you could imagine there in Columbus, like nearly 50 degrees, sunny, a little bit of gust of wind, but not even a drop of rain or snow. So was a little nervous going into it, but my biggest takeaway was, we were speaking about this in our group chat, but everything that really could have hindered Michigan's ability to not win that game really happened, and they still were able to win. And what I mean by that is, Michigan's best defensive player, I would argue, is Mike Morris. He played all of a series, maybe 2 series. He was injured going into the game, so he didn't play much. Blake Corum gave it a go. Chris warned that probably, there was a little bit more to it than just a bone bruise, and that ended up very much being the case. And we can, briefly touch on that later. Blake Corum's now officially going to have surgery and out for the rest of the year. So, best offensive player isn't playing at all. Weather is perfect. The first series for Ohio State, they drive right down the field. And Michigan didn't get a lot of pressure on Stroud the entire game, and they still were able to comfortably win. I mean, it was a good game. I will agree it was, it got away from them at the end when they were doing a full pressure, zero blitz, cover zero, blitzing everybody. And if one person misses, then he's got a huge opening to be able to score. So I was really excited, even though the guys were wide open as well. like JJ hitting those plays, that was huge. And I know, Bryant, you've mentioned like those weren't, anything impressive, which I would agree throw wise, but JJ has missed wide open guys this season. So for him to learn, like, hey, maybe you don't have to make an absolutely on the fingertips throw on some of those long ones when they're wide open. You just got to kind of put it up there. That was good to see. And I mean, they won in Columbus, which they hadn't done since 2000, the year 2000. And so I was looking back, and it was kind of funny. The preseason, one of my preseason predictions was that Michigan was going to win the Big Ten again, and that 2 Big Ten teams were going to make it into the college football playoff. And now I'm looking like maybe that will take place. And never really thought that Harbaugh would be able to get it to this point, but he's on the brink of winning back-to-back Big Ten championships. They're going to have a chance of doing it 3 times in a row next year because of their schedule and the returning, potential returning lineup that they'll have. So exciting times for Michigan, for sure. I haven't had something like this that I can really remember in my lifetime, maybe a little bit in the early 2000s, but yeah, other than that, I don't know, Brian, if there was some other key takeaways that you had. I know you were not very were not happy with how Ryan Day was coaching, and I would agree that was a bit of a frustrating aspect of his coaching style that game.
Yeah, no, I think CP, you hit on it in the opening. I think it was just a thorough out coaching job by Michigan. Neither teams had their best players. I mean, you can't understate the importance of Travion Henderson for their run game. They were playing like a third string linebacker as their primary running back, so that definitely causes some issues. But that being said, I mean, Ohio State, like you mentioned, they marched the ball down the field, and then it was just unforced penalties. Drop passes, all things that show you that they were not ready from a coaching standpoint for that game. They weren't prepared. So it was frustrating to watch. Especially in the first half, Ohio State was just the much better team. They could move the ball. They were stopping Michigan, and they couldn't finish drives. They were killing themselves. So they had an opportunity to sort of put themselves in a big lead in the first half, and it didn't happen. And then you saw the sort of the formula that Michigan has used all season, using their depth and sort of their style of play to wear teams down and grind on you in the second half. I saw a stat that Michigan has the best second half scoring margin since the 2012 or 13 Florida State team, that Jameis Winston team. Wow. I think they've outscored their opponents in the second half by like 185, which is just crazy. And it is a testament to their depth and sort of their style of play, and they imposed their will and their game plan on Ohio State. So definitely a huge moment for Michigan. I think, it pains me to say it, but Michigan's time's come. Hopefully it doesn't last long. They still have a long ways to go to get to an Ohio State success or even the Michigan State success that they had in the early 2010s. But you can't downplay the last 2 years now. I know a lot of us thought last year there was a lot of flukiness to that game, just with sort of the weather and Ohio State players having the flu and just sort of how it went down. But twice in a row, you can't question those things anymore. Oh, Michigan's a better coached team. I think they have better football players, whereas Ohio State has better talent. And that's how you win big games and win championships. So Michigan did that. I'll be interested to see how Ohio State responds to it. You talked about they fired a lot of coaches last year. You have to take a hard look this year. I don't. Ryan Day, if he's still the play caller, he makes a lot of questionable play calling, and you just wonder what their strategy is, and it's game in and game out, even against some of the worst opponents. So I'll be interesting to see what happens in Columbus. Do they lose some coaches? Do they lose some recruits? Do they show any signs of sort of slowing down? Because they're gonna reach the playoffs, or they're gonna win the Rose Bowl and be 11-12 or 1. It's gonna be a really impressive season on the outside, but on the inside, there's some leaks. So are those leaks gonna crack, and could we start to see a little bit of downfall from their football program? It's going to be interesting to follow.
Yeah, for sure. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the fact that Michigan went into the game with Blake Corum injured, and we saw on the very first possession that he was able to go for a play or two, and then he went out and didn't come back in. And honestly, you could tell as soon as he went to the sideline, he talked to Mike Hart, who's the running backs coach, and basically you could just tell by everyone's reaction that he had just said, "I can't go anymore." And that to me is why it's like, I mean, why, if you're Ohio State, then if Michigan, Michigan, their strength is their running game, why are you sending all out blitzes on the first touchdown of the game for Michigan? They sent an all out blitz with no safety help, whereas Michigan threw like a 7 to 8 yard pass that should have been tackled. He should have been tackled right there. The Ohio State guy had a terrible angle. But it's like, if he doesn't make that tackle, it goes for a touchdown. And that's exactly what happened, because there's zero safety help because they sent the safety on a blitz up the middle. And it's just like, Ohio State, if you know they're not going to be able to run as effectively as that you thought they would be able to, because they don't have their best running back, then you can't get beat on long touchdowns in the passing game. That's the number one thing you can't do. And they did it twice in the first half. It's the reason why it wasn't a blowout. I mean, honestly, in watching the game, at one point I said to myself, it should be 20-3 Ohio State right now, and they should be going in to score to go up 27-3 at one point. Yep. And instead, it's, they allowed Michigan to hang around. And if anything, at halftime, I was like, game over. Ohio State is not going to be able to hang with Michigan anymore, because they just didn't have the right mindset. And honestly, to me, it comes down to Ohio State doesn't have the right head coach in place right now. I don't think so.
I absolutely agree, Chris. You're hitting on points that like I am totally agreeing with you on, because I joked about this in our podcast in the first like couple of weeks, and I sort of felt that this was the case, but it really came to fruition that Ryan Day has created Ohio State like how Oklahoma was under Lincoln Riley.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I'm gonna this sort of game would have been worse if it was like D'Antonio's 2013 to 2015 teams playing against this Ohio State team. I mean, you would have crushed them, like it's the same sort of principles that are applying to Michigan's team now. And the other thing that you said, Chris, that really I totally agree with you on is like Blake Corum's out. Right. Donovan Edwards in that first quarter was hesitating. You could tell it was really uncomfortable for him to take a handoff and put it in his left arm and not his natural right arm. And so it's like, learn from what everybody did this year. 2 deep safeties, everything in front of you. Yeah. JJ showed that he can't make those like deep throws. And I'm sorry, like if you would have saw CJ Stokes, who they tried to get going a little bit, their freshman running back, he was just missing like wide open holes. So like Ohio State's a little lucky that Blake Corum wasn't healthy, because if they played that style with Blake Corum there, I very much believe this, he would have won the Heisman. He would have had over 200 yards rushing. And to me, we also joked about this, but I very much think this is coming to fruition. Like Jim Knowles is Ohio State's is Ohio State's version of Don Brown for Michigan. Like he, for no reason, I look back at the stats and they were like a predominantly like off coverage zone team for a lot of the year. And then he just went to go, hey, we're going to play press man. Like even Illinois played press man on Michigan, but they still did a lot of deep safety. Look, they were good. That's why that defensive coordinator for Illinois is really good. He's really good at disguising stuff. And I was just like, what are you doing? And then the only other theme that I want to just briefly touch on is, the common with Ohio State fans, some of their media was saying like, well, Michigan, they just had 5 plays, right? It was 5 plays that won them the game. And in my mind, there's 2 things that I say to that. Like one, like if I take away your team's 5 biggest plays, then of course you're going to like have less points or whatever. But the second part of that is they conveniently don't talk about in the third quarter. Michigan had a 9-minute drive, a 14-play 9-minute drive where they scored a touchdown. And that was like stereotypical run the ball against, impose their will.
Second half.
And then JJ like making that run in. Ronnie Hickman, their safety, could have laid JJ out, and he was a little hesitant and didn't do it. I agree with you. Like, I don't really know what they do, because they've made these wholesale changes last year. And Mickey Marotti, their strength coach, is a legend, and he's, you know, been there for years and years. So I'd be curious from your guys' perspective, what would you do if you were Ryan Day right now, like to try to offset this? Because if he loses again next year, he is so much on the hot seat that I think they would just go their separate ways.
Yeah. I guess I'll start off. I don't really know because so to me, and just one more thing about the game before I talk about just Ryan Day specifically, is that the one thing Ohio State, or the one thing Michigan had to do because Blake Horn was hurt and because, you know, the way the game was going to play out, at least initially, was keep it close at halftime. And that's, you know, that, and Ohio State, all they had to do was convert, you know, one of those earlier drives into a touchdown, and it's, you know, maybe 17-3 at half. And, you know, if they don't give up, you know, 2 75-yard touchdowns. But anyways, when thinking about Ryan Day, it's like his philosophy is very, and you and Alec, to your credit, you've been saying this all year, and we were kind of like, oh, well, that was just like the 1 year, like last year, that was the one thing with the game last year, is that, in the cold, they were, you know, kind of soft, whatever, there was reasons for that. But honestly, they are what they are right now. And it's under Urban Meyer, they were a power spread rushing attack. It was not a power. It was not a spread attack to pass the ball. It was a power rushing spread. And it started off with JT Barrett, you know, and Ezekiel Elliott, and they really were, and they built a great O-line under Urban Meyer. They have good running backs right now. They don't have a quarterback that can run. He doesn't want to run. And their offensive philosophy is not built around having a really good O-line that can open up holes for, you know, those really good running backs that they do still have. And honestly, I don't know. Unless Ryan Day were to give the reins over to a different offensive coordinator and say, hey, like, we need to incorporate more power running into this offense, I don't really know how they're going to get much better. And I shouldn't say much better. I should say the ability to beat teams like Michigan and Georgia. Because obviously they're very good, and you know, with the way college football is if they have so much talent that, like, the Indianas of the world's, you know, Penn State's just a watered down version of Ohio State. You know, they're trying to be the same thing. They just don't have as much talent. So you have to have, you know, some curveballs to throw in. Honestly, I was so underwhelmed by Ohio State's coaching staff because at halftime of that game, I was like, this is exactly what Michigan needed to do. They're within striking distance. They can go ball control all second half if they want to. And Ryan Day approached the second half as if it's like, all right, we're going to get 15 possessions and he was punting on 4th and 3 multiple times. And it's like, you're not going to get the ball back. You're not going to get the ball back if you think you're going to, I don't know. I think it was horribly managed, but I think that's a credit to Harbaugh and his staff. But I'll go to you, Brian.
I think absolutely you have to question Ryan Day's coaching ability. I think that's number one. Is he going to get fired? No. Is he going to give up control of the offense? Probably no. I think that what they would need to do to make a quick turnaround and again, we're talking turnaround here, they're going to be 11-1 playoff team or Rose Bowl team. But to get back to the cream of the crop in the Big Ten, I think it's the running quarterback aspect. Like you said, CP, with the power spread. I think that is their bread and butter, and I think that type of style can win you national level games against Clemson's and Georgia's of the world, but it can win you the Big Ten. I mean, you have to, in the Big Ten, to win these games week in and week out when you don't know what the weather's going to be, you're going to have to be able to run the football. I think they have good running backs. They had really bad luck with Mayan Williams and Henderson getting hurt. I think both those guys are really good. So I don't think it's on the running backs, but definitely their O-line is more of a finesse O-line, and CJ Stroud, they don't have quarterbacks that can hurt you with their feet. So with their philosophy, I don't think they're going to have I don't think they're going to be able to break through again unless they revert back, focus on the run game, get a dual threat quarterback in there.
Yeah, and the scary part about that is, like, their backup right now, Kyle McCord, he's not much of a runner. Like, he was known as being an accurate passer. You know, that he took, you know, Ohio State took McCord over JJ. And so, you know, Notre Dame took whatever that one kid's name is over JJ. And yeah, it's funny to see this dynamic play out because I agree with you. Like, they need to have a quarterback that can at least be a little bit mobile. CJ just really does not want to run. I mean, even At the beginning of the game, he had an opportunity to run, didn't do it, did like that first play of the game for him when Will Johnson kind of locked up Marvin Harrison Jr. and he like forced it to go over there. In the replay, he had like 9 yards that he could have just ducked out and ran for. So that is one of the things that I am very curious to see. The other thing that I thought was just crazy is that, Harbaugh throughout his tenure at Michigan had always been critiqued of being like not a great coach when it came to in-game coaching. And like first series of the second half, they get the ball, 4th and 1, immediately goes for it, gets the first down, right? And then 3rd and 1, doing a play, a handoff like throw with their running back. Like I never saw them doing that. And I mean, it was just a great call. And, going back to what we were talking about, I've been trying to say like parallels a little bit between Michigan last year through next year and like MSU 2013 to 15 is D'Antonio. He'd pull out those trick plays every once in a while, and he was really good about knowing when to do that. So yeah, I'm just excited about the Michigan football future, and they're right now playing at a level that I still think that they have a chance to win the national title. Now, I will say it is a very small chance because Georgia, similarly to Michigan, they turn it on when they are in those big games. Like when you saw them against Tennessee, which was fully healthy, had even their best wide receiver back for that game. Georgia won easily, and it should have been way more than that, right? They just kind of have these letdown games, and Georgia plays a very similar style to Michigan. So with Blake Corum out, I think Donovan Edwards is able to take the reins there. He's not quite, doesn't have the vision, but as you saw, and this was something that Michigan forums with the reporters that talked about from seeing Donovan in high school, and I didn't watch a lot of his like games, but he gets better with the more touches that he gets, and you could see that in the Ohio State game. Once he got comfortable, once he got 12, 15, 20 carries, he started to really like get comfortable in that, and I think that's what they're going to have to do here now moving forward. So yeah, overall, I think we hit everything that came about that game. Exciting game overall. I admit last year I told you guys I can't tell you how many times I've like watched the game on rerun. Now I've like now doubled that this week on this game. I've watched it so many times. But let's talk about briefly the MSU Penn State game. I want to defer to you guys. I don't have literally anything to say about it because I just didn't watch it. We were driving back to Tampa as it was going on. So Chris, why don't you start us off, just overall thoughts of the game and, things that you were impressed with, things that you're just still disappointed in. And then that can lead to just you guys talking a little bit about a season recap of MSU.
Yeah. Honestly, it's unfortunate that it was so easy to predict how the game was going to go. But it's with the fact that they had so many starters missing, which I don't know why those guys had to miss 4 games. I just don't get it. Jacoby Windman, Angelo Gross should have been playing anyways. But it's like, without having multiple starters plus a lot of depth pieces against a team like Penn State, they just, they weren't able to stop the rushing attack. Same thing with Indiana, same thing with Rutgers. They were able to kind of cobble together a rushing defense to beat Illinois, to beat Rutgers. They still gave up 250 rushing yards to Rutgers. Then Indiana, just was blowing open massive holes in rushing defense. That's what happens when you have, a third of your entire depth chart on defense basically missing, and then a bunch of guys hurt in addition to that. But honestly, I thought it was a pretty valiant effort. I thought from the defense, I thought they were hanging in there. The D line was playing pretty well. I mean, you could tell that Slade and Barrow and Maverick Hansen and Derek Harmon and guys like that, we're just beat up, but they're cycling them in there, and they were playing pretty well. Deshaun Mallory was playing defensive end again as a defensive tackle, and he was putting up a good fight. But it's there's a reason defensive tackles play defensive tackle and not defensive end. It's because they can't necessarily set the edge and get outside if the play goes that way. But so, I mean, I thought they played about as well as they could. I mean, it was 21-16 with, I think, 5 minutes left in the game or 6 minutes left in the game. So
Yeah.
MSU was in striking distance with a chance to win the game. And then, Penn State had one long drive that basically ended it. And then they got the ball back on an interception and put the nail in the coffin. But, I thought the offense played okay. The O-line looked rough. I would say the rushing game was pretty rough, and they couldn't really protect Thorne that well. So I think they need an overhaul of the O-line. But it's hard to really draw a ton of conclusions from this. I just wish they had been able to beat Indiana, which they should have either way.
Yeah.
But honestly, no bowl game, like, that doesn't really register. It's almost better to have the season over, I think. So I'll pass over to Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a tough watch. I stuck in there till the end. But it was like watching, like, somebody with like their leg cut off try to beat like this fully operating machine. Like we talked about it in the chat, but you go into the game, we had one cornerback. Amir Speed was our only cornerback that dressed. Dylan Tatum, our freshman nickelback safety, had to start at corner, and we had no one else at corner. And it doesn't even get to, the defensive line issues that we have with all the suspensions and injuries. So, and Tatum was responsible for 2 of Penn State's just broken touchdowns with busted coverages, and he had been playing corner for like 3 days, so not surprising. So it was tough to watch. Again, I don't think Penn State's good. I think full strength we would have beat them. So it was frustrating. Some positives, I think Thorne did some positive things in the passing game with Coleman and Reed. Reed had a weird game where he had 3 fumbles and he lost 2 of them. I don't know if that was just him trying to do too much in his last game or what, but those fumbles really killed us. And the bowl game, losing out in the bowl game, I think it's tough because you always want those practices for the younger players. But at the same time, we might be at the point where there was so much adversity and drama for this season. It might just be a good time to just take a few weeks off, like reassess where we're at with the coaching staff, players reassess who wants to come back, who doesn't, and then go full steam ahead in January. So it might be for the best all around anyway. So we'll see what decisions Tucker makes in the next few weeks. We'll see what he does with the coaching staff, what he can do to finish out the recruiting class, which is despite having 12 guys, we have 12 really good guys. We need to get the numbers up, but it's a really, really solid class right now. So I'm excited to see how we close and see the decisions that Tucker makes. And I mean, I guess we can transition into sort of. Do you want to transition to next year outlook, or what do you want to do, AP?
Yeah. If you guys can just go ahead and go right into talking about what your guys' initial thoughts. We'll do same thing that we've done this year of just like our preseason predictions of the teams, but there's a lot of unknowns right now. So to the best of your ability, give a little bit of your thoughts on how MSU is going to fare next year and like key people that you think are going to step up. Brian, I don't know if you want to start. Oh, I don't know if Brian, can you hear us? If not, Chris, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sounds like Brian might be having technical issues, but yeah, I think that it's a huge offseason. It goes without saying. I think that we're going to probably see some coaching changes. I'm not sure if they're going to be as extreme as some people that follow Michigan State think should happen. I mean, I think that when you look at offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, I think it's possible they keep both. It's also possible they get rid of both, or they get rid of one and not the other, and then make some changes on the other side of the ball. I think we'll probably see both coordinators stay, if I had to guess at this point, because I mean nothing has changed yet, and it's been, the season's over at this point. I do think you'll see some guys like. Maybe the special teams coach get let go, maybe like 1 or 2 other coaches. But I think for the most part, Mel likes the staff, and I don't necessarily think that they have to get rid of one or the other. I think early on, everyone was like, it has to be the defensive coordinator because their defense is doing horrible when they had literally the 3 most key players for the entire defense get hurt in the first game, or by the end of the first game, they were hurt. And 1 was out for the season. 1 was out for the first 6 games. Slade was hurt for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So that's 1 player in each level of your defense that's just gone. So yeah, it's going to be hard to function. And then they had more injuries. But Hazleton, they weren't very good last year either. I mean, it's been 2 years in a row of really bad pass defense. And I don't know that you necessarily should excuse that and allow him to get one more shot, but I think they probably will. And then Jay Johnson, I mean, I'm very hot and cold with him. There's some games where I think he did a good job. Like Illinois, he did a great job, I thought. I thought the Michigan game was a really poor example of his, game calling ability. I thought that there's a lot of things that they could have done in the second half against Michigan that they didn't try, and they weren't very creative at all in that game. So I think that I could see him making some changes. I think that there need to be at least a few changes, just because when you have a bad season, it's almost like you have to bring people back in by making some changes at least. So yeah, we'll see. I hope right now the staff is focused on just recruiting. I think maybe they just get through the early signing period, which is like December 21st or something like that. And then maybe they make 2 or 3 or 4 coaching changes. But we'll see what happens. But it's a big offseason, and I think there could be some transfers too.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, are you there? Can you test?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I heard most of that. I mean, I was same thing throughout the season. I had moments where I wanted to get rid of Jay and get rid of Hazelton, but I can totally get on board with bringing them both back. I think the one coaching change that you have to see is I think Ross Ells. Our special teams have just been horrible the past few years. A little bit of it was masked last year just because Reed was so good as a returner, and Behringer's, he's the best punter in the nation. So I think those two elite players masked a little bit of it. But we've had so many coverage busts. You're playing a long snapper that cost us the Indiana game, cost us points in other crucial spots.
Yeah.
We have no kickers on the roster right now. It's besides a walk on. We have
That's
one
terrible.
punter. I think at minimum you have to get rid of him. There's a few others that I could get on board with, but I think at the very least you got to get rid of him and shore up the special teams, because the special teams isn't necessarily a place where you need to be great at, but you need to be solid. You can't let it cost you games, and that's what's happened to us.
Yeah.
So I want to see a change there. I'm anxious to see the close of the recruiting classes. We've been touted. These coaches are such great recruiters, and they've had a lot of misses, had some decommits, which most of them are understandable. But if we can close out strong with recruiting, if we can make some coaching changes, I can be pretty optimistic about next year. The schedule's definitely going to be easier. We have Washington, Michigan, and Penn State all at home. We do have to go to Columbus, but I think that the schedule is much more manageable, very early on, obviously, but where we're sitting today, I think it's much more manageable than it was this year. So I think there's some things to be optimistic about. The other thing that I'm going to be interested to see how it plays out is the quarterback room. We only have 3 quarterbacks right now, no recruits. So is Mel going to bring somebody in the transfer portal to compete with Thorne? Are we going to try to bring in a recruit? What's going to happen there? Because we've talked about it a lot. I think Thorne can be a very good winning quarterback if he's got the right pieces around him, but I don't necessarily think that we're going to have those pieces next year for him to be able to win with him as our quarterback. So, I'm always in the park that if he's not our guy, play Caden Hauser and go through the growing pains with him, but let him learn early so you can reap the rewards later on. So I'm going to be interested to see how the coach or the quarterback situation plays out.
Yeah, I've been very vocal with you guys that from my perspective with MSU, I could see those changes that you guys have talked about. And this is me being as objective as possible. I really do think that both of your coordinators have proven in certain very limited time that they can get the job done. Like Hazelton, if you guys played with the health, which is, put that in quotations, of what you had against Michigan and that scheme the entire year, you're winning 7, 8, 9 games. That was really good. And then Jay Johnson on the other side, I think he schemes up some really good stuff, but it's really hard when you don't have a very good running game to complement the offense. And I do, though, the one thing I will say that is the theme of what I was, my initial point. I just don't think Thorne's it. Thorne reminds me just so much of like Wilton Spade at Michigan, or not like saying they're similar styles, but like there's just another level of quarterback that you could get to, and I just don't think Thorne has that ability to get to that point. I just don't. And maybe he proves something this offseason, but I really am thinking that MSU is going to have to either bring in a recruit, bring in a transfer, but very much make it an open competition, whether it be Kim, whether it be Hauser, whether it be Thorne. Like, you got to just get elevated quarterback play. So that's going to be my keys for MSU this year.
Yeah.
Anything else that you guys want to talk about from an outlook perspective? I'll briefly touch on Michigan, but I don't want to cut you guys off if there was other things you wanted to chat about. Good.
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, with Michigan, pretty simple. Like we've talked about this in our chat. Michigan has like, which is very refreshing to see. They have a really good culture right now, and there's like rumblings that some guys that would normally probably, either go to the draft or maybe look at like transferring, are going to potentially stay. So people that they've highlighted is like Mike Sanderstill. If he returns in the nickel role, he's a great leader on defense and on offense. Their offensive line, like there's two guys that could go to the draft, and I think they would be, pretty decent round picks, maybe second through four. And I'm talking about their guards, Zach Sinner and Trevor Keegan. But there is the potential on offense for Michigan to return, JJ McCarthy, Donovan Edwards. They'll lose Olu, and they'll definitely lose Ryan Hayes. They're both leaving. They're out of eligibility, but they have guys that can replace Ryan Hayes. I believe that, and that are older experienced players. And it'll be interesting to see with the center. Like Olu is gonna probably win the Remington Award for the best center in the country, and it's just going to be hard to replace that. They're going to have Colson Loveland at one tight end, who's really come on the second half of the year. They're going to have Eric All, who announced that he's returning to Michigan next year as the other tight end. And then it'll be just interesting. They lose Ronnie Bell. They potentially lose Cornelius Johnson, but he could technically return again. So Roman Wilson might step into that. Andrell Anthony, if he doesn't transfer, could step into that role. They got some highly recruited freshmen. So the offense is going to be, I think, able to get to that next phase. My prediction that has no merit of anything, but I'm just throwing it out there because I think it'll happen, is I really do think Braylon Allen's going to transfer to U of M. And if that happens, I know it's silly. There's nothing to like justify it, but Jim Leonard didn't get the job, and he's likely going to leave Wisconsin. I think Braylon Allen's going to enter the transfer portal, and supposedly Donovan Edwards and Braylon Allen are closer friends than even normal people would anticipate. And Donovan seems to be very open to the idea of sharing the carries. I think he knows from a professional perspective, it's good to not have as many carries. And so they could do a similar style that they did this year and have Braylon be the Blake Corum, guy that gets the heavy load. Edwards comes in and sprinkles in, gets in there a lot as well. Mismatch nightmare. So that's my thing on the offense and my little preseason prediction. We'll see if that comes through. And then on defense, similar principles apply. They're only going to lose Mozzie. Will be gone. Mike Morris will likely be gone. And then both of their corners are likely gone as well. They have eligibility to return, but the rumblings initially are that they're both going to be gone. So Will Johnson will take one of the corner spots. They're definitely going to need to hit the transfer portal to get somebody on the other side. But they have the makings to be a really solid defense again. I'm knocking on wood, though. Like, I will admit, if they were to lose coaches, because it happens just seemingly every year with Michigan, they really can't lose Minter. Like they need at least one more year of Jesse Minter there. The consistency with the Ravens style of defense, like they can't have three changes in 3 years. I'd be okay if Sharon Moore left. Like, I understand it would be a loss, but I would just rather be able to replace him than Jesse Minter. So I think and the schedule setting up for Michigan next year to have a pretty easy ride again. I'm high on Penn State next year. I think they're going to be a pretty darn good team next year. So that'll be a tough game at Penn State, but they should be right near the top again. So I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add, Chris, on just outlook on Michigan.
No, I mean, we can go into, this weekend's
Yeah.
games if you guys
want. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a forum real quick. This news broke today. Mazi Smith was charged with a felony gun convict or gun charge. I don't know what exactly the lingo is, the legal jargon is, but needless to say, it's a felony, right? They were aware of it seemingly several weeks ago. I'll let you guys give a few minutes here, 5 minutes to vent on it, because I will admit it is a terrible look for Harbaugh and the Michigan program after all the hoopla they did to get the MSU players like not only suspended but charged, right? And the hypocrisy here is pretty tough. Even for a Michigan fan to be able to justify. So I don't know if there's anything that you guys want to add other than that, but I'm going to give you guys the floor to do so.
Go for it, CP.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly, and just like the tunnel stuff, I don't really want to talk about this. I mean, it's not like I don't want Mazi Smith to go to jail at all. I don't think he deserves it. I don't think it's necessary. The issue for me is the campaigning and basically the media. I guess I'm trying to think of the term, but basically the campaigning that Michigan did to get the MSU players criminally charged. I mean, I understand Kari Crump, you can't swing a helmet at somebody that's above and beyond anything. The rest of the guys in the tunnel, it was a minor scuffle, no serious injuries, not even something that would keep the Michigan players from missing a game because they both were at Rutgers the next week. But Harbaugh and Ward Manuel both felt the need to continue to say it should be criminal charges. An apology isn't going to get it done here. They should all go to jail, basically. And that's them actively campaigning to ruin kids' lives over a very minor fight that resulted in no injuries. And those kids missed 4 games. Jacoby Woodman's draft stock is going to be, probably massively impacted. And so it's just massively hypocritical, but it's kind of to be expected at this point because that's kind of how Harbaugh is. So I'll pass it to Brian.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on it. The point isn't that any of these, all of these instances, I don't think are criminal in nature. Obviously there's some handgun things that you got to be cognizant of, but it doesn't sound like any of those apply to Mazi Smith. He's had a license that expired, was carrying a gun that was unregistered, so it was more of a boneheaded thing than anything that was deserving of criminal charges. But I think you said it, CP. The thing that is just really disturbing is Michigan's leadership, Harbaugh, Ward Manuel, and the Washington County Prosecutor's Office using their fandom and sort of the Michigan man in them to try to punish and ruin other people's lives when they were doing this all while knowing that they were covering up Mazi Smith's arrest. Like, he was arrested, taken to jail, released from jail, and went right onto the team plane. And all that was happening, no suspensions, no nothing. And then the tunnel incident happened, and you're campaigning for criminal charges when it was a scuffle where nobody got hurt. So it's not surprising. It's just disappointing. I think Michigan has sort of this position and brand where they can sort of bulldoze things and drive narratives, and I think that's exactly what happened to Michigan State. We got bulldozed. They've ruined our season in many respects. Whereas if Mazi Smith doesn't is suspended like Amani Bates was, for example, for the same exact charge, arrested, suspended, and it happened very quickly. If the same thing happened to Mazi Smith, he doesn't play. That's obviously a big ding to Michigan's defense. And then even today, when finally pressed for covering this up, Ward Manuel and Harbaugh released like 1-sentence statements about Mazi's a good kid, so we've taken that into consideration. So he's still going to play. He's not going to be suspended, which is just absurd. So are you saying that all the Michigan State players who don't have any criminal records are bad people and that should be held against them? So it's just unfortunate all around, but not surprising. It's more comical than anything. If you're not one of the players that are impacted by this, but it's just sort of like the Jeff Jackson thing. You steal a car, you drive drunk, you crash the car, you use a fake name, and you don't get it. You have no charges. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's
That's
that's a
Driving
ridiculous.
the athletic director's car.
Yeah, that one to me is worse than this with Mozzie. Like one little correction, Bryant, like Mozzie wasn't taken to jail. He was
He was.
no, he
It,
wasn't. I
yeah,
just looked it up.
it came out right after it.
It says
Ann Arbor police released a statement that he was indeed arrested at the scene.
He was processed, which means that you were
County
taken to jail.
prosecutor Eli confirmed that his office did not immediately authorize charges since Smith was not lodged in jail. If Smith had been jailed, Sabat would have been legally required to charge him sooner.
Yeah, he was arrested, cuffed, brought to the station, and then they released him there.
Oh.
And then went from the station to the team plane.
I think the distinction I believe
it's process versus
is being held in jail. Yeah. So he was immediately processed out, which means that probably Jim Harbaugh called and was like, "Hey, we have a game like in a day or two, so get him out there."
And the other thing is, again, exact same thing happened to Imani Bates. He was not released right away. He was held in jail.
Yeah, I mean, needless to say, it's a terrible look. Even if Mozzie, which the facts have came out of, he might, or it looks like it was very much like he bought the gun legally. He had a register, whatever. I don't own a gun, so I don't know everything that you need for it. But he had like the permit and the licensing had expired. He was in the process of getting it renewed, but it wasn't renewed at that time, which is legal.
Absolutely.
So it's just unfortunate for him, and he does seem to be like a good guy. But again, it's just like the consistency thing. I can understand why any MSU fan or player on the team would be outraged by this because it looks terrible.
Yeah, it's just a boneheaded mistake by Mozzie. It's not about him. It's about the Washington prosecutor's office and Jim Harbaugh and Ward Manuel.
Yeah, it certainly does not paint the prosecutor office in a positive light as well. So, and then the last thing before we get to the games, don't have to speak too much on it, but Blake Corum, he's out for the year. Looks like he did something a little bit more to his knee, which I actually was scared about when I saw the reaction. He came over to the side and he gave like one of these where you could like tell, I think something happened when he cut, which is really unfortunate because, he was trying to be a soldier, get out there and, try to gut one out. And everything that was reported is he wouldn't damage it any further by playing. But I feel like, man, hindsight's always 2020, but like if he doesn't play that game and he rests up until the playoff game, does he have the ability to make it to the playoffs? But the other thing that is obviously confirmed by this is it was broken by Ian Rappaport, and Ian Rappaport got this from agent circles. So Blake Corum is 100% going to be in the NFL draft. Like everybody knew that, but there's a reason why it wasn't broken by like local media. He got it from agent circles, which makes sense as he's an NFL guy. But really unfortunate. He's been such a good ambassador for the Michigan program. It's hard to root against him. He made one boneheaded comment about Tucker, but still in good fun. He's been a really awesome running back for Michigan, and I expect him to turn pro here soon. And it's just unfortunate that he doesn't get to enjoy this playoff run. But let's go ahead and get into the games for the weekend. So there's 5 games, championship games this week. I'll start with Utah and USC. Utah is +3 against USC, and I'm going off of what my lines are that I have. This isn't, I don't think, from like MGM or anything like that. So I had, Utah +3, over-under is at 68. I'll make mine quick. I like USC here. I think they're hitting their stride right now. They're not playing an emotional game against Utah at Utah. And if I had to pick the over-under, I would honestly go with the over. I think there's going to be points galore here. So I'm going to have USC -3 and over 68. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is a big. It's super hard to beat a team twice in the season. It's,
Yeah.
obviously, especially in football. I think this is a big revenge game for USC. I think USC plans to score a lot of points and will. And I think
Yeah.
Utah's, playing in Vegas. Utah is going to try to keep up, but they won't be able to. So I think USC will win, and I like the over.
Nice. Bryant?
Yeah, nothing to add. I had the exact same thing. I think, yeah, the key point is very hard to beat a team twice, and USC has everything, on the line. So I think they're going to play really well, score a lot of points, and yeah, I like them to cover 2.5.
Yeah. Well, Brian, why don't you lead us off with this next game? Kansas State is plus 2.5 versus TCU. Over under is 62. This is a tough one to predict. A lot
Yeah.
on the line with this game. So why don't you start us off and let's hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think this is one where, my gut is telling me Kansas State is going to pull this off. They've been a little hotter the past few weeks. They blew Baylor out, they blew West Virginia out, they blew Kansas out. So they're coming in playing really well. Um, and again, TCU beat Kansas State at TCU earlier this year, so that the whole second game angle as well. So guts telling me Kansas State, but I don't. I'm going to stay away from it. I think it's too unpredictable. Just the one thing that I hope doesn't happen is that, yeah, TCU loses and then Ohio State or, God forbid, Alabama jumps them and knocks them out of the playoffs. I think TCU has done everything they need to do to be 11-1 in the Big 10 or Big 12 regular season championship. They've had a really good year, so I hope that they make the playoffs even if they lose.
Yeah, same. Chris?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really good game. I think it's two really evenly matched teams. Correct me if I'm wrong. They didn't play during the regular season, right?
Yeah, they
No,
did.
they did.
They
TCU
did.
won. Yeah.
TCU won by
Okay.
10 at home.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I to be honest, I just don't really follow the Big 12 much in general. Like, and that doesn't mean this week or like the last couple weeks. It just in general throughout the season, I just feel like that's the conference I follow the least. But honestly, I did watch a lot of the TCU Texas game. I was very impressed with TCU's defense. I think in this game, I'm going to take TCU. Probably just straight up. I'm not sure about what the spread is or what the over under is. I think I have it up here. Yeah, TCU. Yeah, so I'll take TCU minus 2.5. And I'll probably take the under in this game. I think it'll be low scoring.
Yeah. I don't have anything further to add. I'm gonna go with exactly what Chris said. So let's have Chris. Why don't you lead us off here with LSU is this is a pretty big one. Plus 17.5 I see versus Georgia, and the over under I had was 51. So what are your thoughts here on this game?
Yeah, this is one where I think LSU will play better than they have the last couple weeks. I think LSU recently, after recently losing, I think they're going to be looking to bounce back, and obviously they know how big of a game this is. It's in a dome. It's still in Atlanta, right? This game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I honestly, I just think that Georgia is simply a much better team. I think this is kind of like Michigan playing. I would say like Illinois, if Illinois had made like a better than Purdue, but like it's still not a team that's like a peer with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty large spread. I could see LSU covering, but Georgia winning by like 14, 17 points. But I definitely think Georgia will win this game.
Yeah. Bryant?
Yeah, I think this is one's going to be. I think Georgia's going to make a statement. I like Georgia big. Jaden Daniels injured. Sounds like he didn't practice much this week. Got injured last week, so I don't think LSU is going to have the horses, and I think Georgia's going to want to make a statement.
Then Georgia will cover. Yeah, I'll change.
Yeah. I like Georgia, and I like the over on this one as well. We're going to wrap this up here. Last two games, guys. Give me both of them at the same time. U of M minus 17 against Purdue, over under 52. Clemson minus 7.5 versus UNC, over under 63.5. Bryant, why don't you start us off? What are your thoughts on both games?
Yeah, I think 17's too much for the Michigan Purdue game, to be honest. I'm interested to see how Michigan looks without Corum, and then with Purdue, who I think Brahm is a good coach. they have sort of a more of a blueprint of what Michigan looks like without Corum. So I'm going to be interested to see how Michigan's offense can play, um, without Corum for the whole game, and it's part of the game plan. I think they're going to have some struggles. I don't think JJ is nearly there yet to win games by himself, and is Edwards up to the task of leading the backfield? I'm not sure. And then I think on the Purdue side, I think these types of games they're going to throw the kitchen sink at them. They're gonna try to do crazy stuff to get some scores and keep it close. So I think Michigan will win by 14-ish, but I think it's going to be close. And then the Clemson North Carolina game, I've got Clemson, but I think it's going to be close. So I like North Carolina to cover, and I'd like the over. I think North Carolina can put up points and they can move the ball. So I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I don't know if North Carolina will have the defense to win. Clemson still has a really good defense, but I think it's going to be close.
Yeah, for sure. And I know Brian, you might have to drop off here, but we appreciate you giving us your picks. Chris, why don't you go ahead and talk about each game and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a different take from Brian. I agree that Purdue is going to throw the kitchen sink at Michigan, and I saw a stat. I think Braum is 3-0 against top 5 teams while at Purdue, which is, that's
insane.
Some of that is like the circumstances of playing Michigan State at home, last year after the Michigan game when they were beat up, and sometimes you just get teams in a good spot to beat them in an upset. But there's definitely something to be said for his record. But at the same time, I just don't think this Purdue team, if it was last year's Purdue team, I think they'd have a really good shot in this game. Mm-hmm. But this year, I think Charlie Jones is a good receiver, but I think he's not great. I don't think he's amazing by any means, and he's easily their best receiver. So I think he'll get some yards. He's a good player, but I don't think they have enough, defensively or in the running game. I think Devin Mockabee is a good running back, but I mean, in terms of top Big Ten running backs, he's probably not even close to the top 5 or 6 guys. So I think Purdue's, pretty limited. And like I said, I don't even think that they're, like an Illinois type. So I could see 42-21 for Michigan. I think it will be a pretty high scoring game. Playing in a dome, Big Ten teams, they're going to try to get the offense going, unlike most of the rest of the season. Right. And then with Clemson, UNC, I don't really have a good feel for this game other than I really don't like Clemson. I really don't think Clemson's very good. I think they even more so than we talked about Michigan this year beating up on, mediocre Big Ten teams. Clemson plays a bunch of just tomato can ACC teams all year. They go to Notre Dame and get blown out. Yeah. So honestly, I will take UNC in this game, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to bet on UNC to beat Clemson.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. Have a little bit of difference on the U of M game. I like UNC in this. Clemson, their season is lost, right? They have very inaccurate quarterback. Yeah. And just seemed like it was just an off sync year for them. They're at a bit of an interesting point in their program right now too. So I like UNC there, and I really do like the over in this game because Clemson does have a decent defense. They have good stars, right? They have really good stars, but they have given up points this year. So I see that this is going to be something similar to that. So I'm going to take the over there in UNC plus 7.5. Michigan minus 17 versus Purdue, and the over-under is 52. Yes, Blake Corum is not going to play, right? But I really just do believe that last week was sort of the coming out party of both Donovan Edwards and JJ McCarthy. And Purdue I hate to say it, they're just not a very good team overall. They have a decent offense this year, but you talked about Charlie Jones. I have a feeling that Michigan is going to absolutely lock him up. I hope that they don't come in underwhelmed here. But I have a feeling that Michigan is going to pour it on Purdue. I think they're going to hit a lot of big plays. I think JJ is going to make a lot of plays with his feet. And I see Michigan winning comfortably. So I am actually, if I was to bet this game, I would take Michigan minus 17 and the over of 52. Yeah. I feel pretty confident in that. I ultimately those are our picks. We'll likely do another episode before the college football playoff, and we have early signing day that's taking place as well. So likely would want to do a podcast at that point as well. But Chris, before that point, anything you want to wrap up with just on the season overall? I don't have the official stats, but I'm very confident that you were the winner this year of these picks. So yeah, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, it just honestly felt like it was a really interesting year. I feel like both locally for Michigan and Michigan State fans and for college football fans in general. I mean, I think with the transfer portal, everything is just it's the Wild West in the offseason now. It's like, I mean, look at USC. USC, would they even be more than like a 7 or 8 win team this year if they didn't have the transfer portal and the ability to go get people or players? So I mean, I think that the transfer portal is as we all thought, it's quickly changing the landscape of football, in good ways and bad ways. I think that like it's going to really help someone like Michigan State this year, where they still don't really have the full roster in place under Mel Tucker, and they're going to lose some talented players this year, so they're going to have to go to the portal again. Then you look at Michigan, they get a guy like Olu, who everyone knew he was going to be a very good center, but I mean, they basically got the best center in the transfer portal, or the best center in the country through the portal this year. And it's amazing. Like, it's amazing that you can just kind of, handpick players. The good teams like Michigan can handpick 1 or 2 guys here and there. And then someone like Michigan State might need 6 or 7 guys. But then hopefully moving forward, Michigan State is more in Michigan's bucket, where they just need a couple players here and there. But yeah, I think that for Michigan State, it was very, very disappointing in terms of, you just want your team to stay healthy so that you can see if they'll reach their potential or if they won't for various reasons. So I think that, at this point, it is what it is. They had a lot of injuries. They also had some off the field issues. Not a good season, but you always try to be an optimist once the season ends and try to win that offseason national championship. So that's what we're fighting for right now.
Yeah, it'll also be, we'll talk about this more in our next podcast, but I would love to get your guys' thoughts on just NIL and recruiting, specifically, because I've now like totally taken a different approach. I remember thinking like, man, Michigan is so far behind with NIL, and a lot of these schools are doing a bit of pay for play. Like, hey, if you come here and sign here, we can guarantee that you'll get this endorsement, which will cost this. But I think like the best use case of this is Texas A&M, and it's just like, it really does show, like, still in college football, you have to have a good program. And even to a certain extent, like, I think Ohio State, like Ryan Day said, he needed like $13 million just to manage the roster. And I kind of think it makes you a little soft. So I like Michigan's approach, where they have a large collective, but they target it for the actual players on the team, where they want to have like a base salary, if you will, for just being on the team. And I think that's the best approach here. I think we're in a little bit of those, like, the peak of inflated expectations on like those hype cycles, right? Like a Gartner hype cycle. I think that's where we're at. And ultimately, I like what Michigan's doing, but we'll get more into that in our next show. As always, we appreciate everybody for listening. Excited to see where these games play out this weekend. And we will be talking to you guys again next week. So thanks again for listening. This is the ABCs of CFB.